The widow of a lineman who died after the power pole he was working on toppled over says she is shocked no lessons have been learned by the power company Delta almost 6 years after her husband's death. Roger Steele was killed in December 2010 whilst working up a pole in Miller's flat. His widow Karen says it's unbelievable there are still thousands of red flagged poles around Dunedin and central Otago. An internal investigation by WorkSafe New Zealand and Dunedin City Holdings into the condition of almost 3,000 rotting and failing poles is underway after former Delta staff member Richard Healy turned whistleblower. Earlier this afternoon, I spoke with Karen Steele via Skype video, and she told me what happened to her husband Roger, who had worked for Delta for 43 years.
He picked up a job sheet and he was sent down to Miller's flat to change a crossarm on a new pole that had just been installed 6 weeks previous. But unbeknown to him, the pole had actually been checked and found to be not correctly installed. It should have been another metre into the ground. And I believe that he was on his own, and I believe he climbed the pole once and took the crossarm off. And as he was going up it again, it fell over with him attached, and he fell down a bank, a 22-metre bank, and unfortunately he was electrocuted as well. So we actually went through 2 court cases, 1 court case and 1 inquiry, because they could never explain to us how he was electrocuted. And I like to think that he was dead before he fell, but it was the coroner. They couldn't tell us definitely.
Why did he go up the pole? There was nothing to tell him that he shouldn't.
There was no red flag on it, and there should have been. It had been inspected previously, and it was found to be faulty, but it wasn't red tagged, and he had no idea. He wouldn't have climbed it, of course, if it had a red tag on it.
So there was a court case, and it went to the coroner's court. And what was the outcome of those 2?
Well, Delta admitted liability, and they were fined $75,000, and then we went to the coroner, who was very good to us. We weren't satisfied because there was no mention in the court case that Roger had been electrocuted as well, and he would never have survived either of those incidents. But we wanted, why didn't they mention it? So we went back to the coroner, and he agreed with us, and he ordered an inquiry, and yes, so it dragged on and on, and it wasn't a nice time.
No, and what was the upshot? What were the findings or the recommendations of the coroner in terms of what Delta should do?
Well, there were many. I can't actually remember, but he did recommend that they shouldn't be on their own. Not that worried Roger, because he'd been doing the job so long and he was so experienced that working alone wasn't a problem for him. But the coroner recommended that there should always be a pair that went out to fix faults.
So when you hear that about 3,000 rotting poles are still out there, how does that make you feel?
Well, I've actually cut myself off from Delta for the last 6 years, and I actually moved from my old home, our home, and I've moved up the hill, so I don't see the Delta trucks because it's just so upsetting for me. And I just, because I haven't inquired or asked about how things were going at Delta, I got quite a surprise, well, a shock really, to think that nothing's actually happened. In fact, it's got worse. And yes, it's just so disappointing that no lessons have been learnt from his death.
What are you worried about, that there could be another accident?
Well, it's just, it's unbelievable that there are so many poles that are red flagged round Central Otago and Dunedin, and they're so far behind in maintenance because everything boils down to money, and it seems like they haven't been giving the maintenance and their core business the money to fix these poles. It's just been put off and put off, and they do a few, and then yes, it's in a terrible state.
And I guess it's a terrible reminder for you about what happened 6 years ago.
Well, it is because we find it quite hard to come to terms with how he died. You should never go to work and not come home from work. Um, if it had happened in a car accident or when he was out deer stalking, you could accept it. But we as a family have found it very hard to accept that it was at work. I would never have thought it would ever happen to him, but there you go.
That's widow Karen Steele speaking about her husband Roger, who was killed after an accident up a faulty power pole in December 2010.